Hello and welcome to pmclounge.com. In this video, we talk about the difference between the definition of ready, definition of done, and acceptance criteria. And we discuss these three in the Scrum context. So they sound similar, but are they similar? Are these three the same concept? Of course not. These three are all different. So we take a look at understanding these three from the perspective of Scrum, right? So in the context of Scrum framework, what does definition of done, definition of ready, and acceptance criteria mean? Now, you have seen product backlog, you have seen sprint backlog. If you have read about the Scrum framework, you already know about this. We have done several videos in the past discussing everything that you need to know about Scrum. They are going to help you if you are preparing for your CSM certification or the PMI ACP certification. All the relevant links will be in the description. If you want to check out the playlist, please do so. But what I'm trying to say here is backlog needs grooming and refinement. Basically, your product backlog needs to be reviewed on a regular basis, and we actually have a specific meeting just for this. It is known as the product backlog refinement meeting, PBR. So this is something that the product owner is responsible for, and what happens is, based on the priority, the near-term backlog items should have stuff like estimates and more details that can be helpful for the team. So all these items that you see in the product backlog, all of them have certain priority associated with them. And those that are near term, that means those that are of the highest priority, they should have more details added to them, like estimates, like, why they have higher priority, more details about their requirements, and all of that is something the product owner is responsible for, and all of that is something that might be discussed in the product backlog refinement meeting. So when we say more details, we are essentially talking about the definition of ready here. There has to be a definition against which a backlog item can be measured to figure out if it is ready to move from the product backlog to the sprint backlog. So that is where definition of ready comes into the picture. If a backlog item is meeting the conditions to move from product backlog to the sprint backlog, then it is essentially ready. So that is what the definition of ready is essentially talking about. But we'll take a look at the difference between the three here. So let's first start off with the product backlog. We've seen the product backlog in the previous slide. We already know what product backlog is. And I just told you how definition of ready ensures that product backlog items move from product backlog to the next backlog, that is the sprint backlog. So these are the sample conditions of definition of ready. These may or may not be applicable directly to your specific projects. But what I'm saying is, this is a sample template definition of ready that you can make use of just to understand the concept of definition of ready. So what does it say? It says user story is clear, testable, feasible, defined. So this is something that you need to have in order for a user story or a backlog item to move from the product backlog to the sprint backlog. User story acceptance criteria is defined. So we use the term acceptance criteria here, and we'll talk more about it as we go further. But acceptance criteria is something that needs to be defined at this stage. User story dependencies are identified. Performance, scalability, security, criteria, whatever that is applicable has been identified. Person who will accept the user story is also identified. Team has a good idea what it will mean to demo the user story. So these could be the conditions that a user story need to follow in order to be called ready. Ready to move from the product backlog to the sprint backlog. So when you meet the definition of ready, you move from product backlog to the sprint backlog, and then you have the sprint. So when sprint goes on, you or the team, the Scrum team, works on the user story, right? And that is where definition of done comes into the picture. So when you were ready, you moved the user story from product backlog to the sprint backlog. Now you will move it out of the sprint backlog. That is, you will say that I'm done with the user story when you meet these conditions. And these are again just sample so that you understand what an example definition of done looks like. So code is produced, it is pre-reviewed, it is checked in, builds are generated without errors, unit tests are written and executed, deployed to system test environment. That means your user story or the functionality, the backlog item, is now deployed to the system test environment, and it has also passed the system tests. It has also passed UAT, user acceptance testing, and signed off as meeting requirements. Relevant documentation and diagrams produced or updated, right? So this is a sample definition of done. Based on the project that you're working on, you may or may not have a similar looking definition of done. So next is the sprint review. So you're done with the sprint. One of the last things that you do in the sprint is you do a demo, you do a sprint review. And this is where acceptance criteria comes into the picture. So the increment that the team has produced as part of the sprint, right? Increment is produced in the sprint. So the increment is measured against parameters of performance, capability, security, scalability, and others as applicable, defined in the acceptance criteria. So acceptance criteria is something that you work with your customer to define. And it may include parameters like performance, capability, security, scalability, and all other good stuff. So this is something which is already defined. This is something that you ensured you met when you called a user story as done. And now in the sprint review, you are just presenting this to the customer, to the sponsor, that you have met the acceptance criteria. And then you also get a sign off by the sponsor or the customer, and then you deploy the user story or the backlog item to production. So that is what that follows after your acceptance criteria has been accepted. I hope you understand the difference between the three, right? Definition of ready essentially means you are ready to start working on something. Definition of done means that you are done with whatever that you were working on. And acceptance criteria is essentially a set of conditions that your customer or the sponsor is going to measure whatever that you have done against. And if they agree, if they believe that the acceptance criteria has been met, then you can deploy whatever that you have built to production. So I hope you understand the difference between the three. I hope you were also able to relate with them based on the example that I gave. If you have any other questions, let me know in the comment. That's all that I have in this one. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.